Straight after this, we'll be talking to Michael Riddell, independent economist. No, we're going to go straight to Michael now, are we? Good. Michael Riddell. Now, you probably don't know Michael Riddell, but my understanding is that not only is he an independent economist and was a monetary economist, but he was also the bank's special advisor on economics. He previously headed the Reserve Bank's monetary markets operation. So he's also been an alternate director on the International Monetary Fund. He was seconded to central banks in Papua New Guinea and Zambia. Wow, that must have been interesting. And he is now an independent economist who understands well the Reserve Bank, the way it's meant to operate, and its leadership. And he joins us now. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
I've got that right, haven't I? You worked for the bank.
Yes, I worked. Spent about 30 years there.
And I was just saying in my introductory comments this year, it's grown like topsy, particularly over the last 6 or 7 years, almost to an extent that you'd think that it was magical. Can you explain why it's grown like topsy?
I think there's multiple reasons. I mean, it's probable that 6 or 7 years ago, the bank was unsustainably small. General sense was that it was stretched pretty thin on its core functions. But that might have been a good basis for taking it from maybe 250 staff to 350 staff. It's actually gone to something like 650 staff. And I think that's a combination of, in some cases, a couple of new functions that they've been given. In some cases, a recommendation from the IMF that they should spend more money on regulating banks and those sorts of things. But ultimately, it's been just that climate of public expenditure in the last 7 or 8 years of where so many government agencies have just put on more staff and have been gold plating their activities. There is some genuine waste. There's the sort of Te Ao Māori advisors, the climate change advisors, the DEI advisors, but that's probably 20 staff out of 600. It's much more about gold plating the core functions. Not so much monetary policy. They haven't added staff there. Maybe they should have, given the record inflation in the last
just about to say.
years.
Yeah, I was just about to say they got one job, and they've spectacularly failed at that. Listen, well, that's the independent view of those who've done the first review. I think I haven't heard anybody come in and say, my God, the RBNZ did a fantastic job during COVID. What was your understanding or impression of the job that RBNZ and Adrian Orr did during that time?
I mean, I think if you're being honest, you'd say their reaction in March, April 2020 was pretty much what everyone supported. People took the view that the economy would weaken sharply and it was appropriate to cut interest rates. That was certainly my view at the time. So the mistake is not so much that. That was best guess at the time. It was a slow reaction when it became apparent pretty quickly that the New Zealand economy was going to rebound strongly. Probably by September, October 2020, we already knew that we were back to levels of economic activity we'd been before the crisis. It took another year before they started raising interest rates. So very sluggish there. Then they lost $11 billion punting in the bond market. 3 Dunedin Hospital, several frigates, whatever. Money's just gone and achieved nothing as a result. So pretty poor performance. But, realistically, humans will make mistakes. A bunch of other central banks have made similar mistakes. What we never had from Orr ever was any sort of serious sense of contrition, any sort of sense of, yeah, we made a mistake. We're really sorry about that. We should have done better. It's been an attempt to sort of bluff his way through all along, and he's been supported and enabled by the people he's surrounded himself with on the Monetary Policy Committee.
When you say that, are they staff members or are they economists that are brought in for particular advice?
So it's a combination. The Monetary Policy Committee that makes the decisions has got 3 other staff members on it. There's the Deputy Governor who does have an economics background, an Assistant Governor, the Senior Manager responsible for macroeconomic policy. She's got a marketing degree, no background in this at all. It's just an extraordinary appointment, and the Chief Economist. Then there are 3 independent economists. One of those, appointed by Grant Robertson, was appointed solely became clear from an Official Information Act request because she was a woman. She wasn't a macroeconomist at all. But none of the three externals, the early ones or the ones they've got now, have ever accounted for their views. We never hear them do interviews. They never do speeches. They never articulate their views. So it's been very much a sort of consensus model, clearly driven by the governor, who's a dominant personality and is regarded by people inside the organisation and who've come out from it as pretty intolerant of dissent. He doesn't take challenge well. You see that in his press conferences, and it's clearly the experience of staff within the bank.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because one of the first things that I hear is the word bully associated with his managerial technique. Would you concede that that is his reputation in many quarters of Wellington and abroad?
Oh, it's not a concession. I mean, it's a clear, open statement and it's a common experience. I personally haven't had those bad experiences with him. I worked alongside him in a couple of stints when he was at the Reserve Bank earlier, but a lot of people have. That's journalists, that's independent economists, that's staff members, that's New Zealand Initiative leaders and so on. It's just one story after another. It's a shocking style. He should never have been reappointed. Responsibility for that's on Grant Robertson and the existing Reserve Bank board. And yet right up to yesterday, the Reserve Bank board chair said he had confidence in Adrian. That reflects very poorly on both of them.
Yes, he was reappointed, I think, in 8th of November 2022. There's a media release here from Grant Robertson, the Minister of Finance. As you say, there were question marks about him and his style even then. And obviously by 2022, you would have known, certainly by the 8th of November, that things had gone wrong. Do you think, in actual fact, Grant Robertson was actually preserving his own legacy there to a certain extent because he and it very much consented to the policy direction that Orr was travelling?
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think it's also a bit of a puzzle as to why a few months before that he didn't just take Adrian aside and say, "Look, you've done the job. One term's enough. We're looking for a new direction." Had he done that, presumably there would have been a quiet press release gone out thanking the governor for his service and opening up the application process. Once he'd gone ahead and gone so far as to consult with the opposition parties that he was obliged to and had them come out strongly critical, then I think it became about sort of self-protection, that getting rid of the governor would have reflected badly on Labor as a government. It was a poor call. Ultimately, the responsibility rested with a combination of Robertson and the board, because Robertson could only appoint someone who was nominated by the board, and it was Quigley and his mates who put up that name, despite all those evident faults that were very much on record and the high inflation.
Yes, I saw Mr. Quigley for the first time yesterday, the chairman of the board. What's his background?
He was an economics academic, specialised in sort of economic history of banking regulation and those sorts of things. He's now Vice Chancellor of Waikato University. Back when he was first on the board, I used to have a bit to do with him, and he was sort of quite good at sort of asking awkward questions of then governors. But once he became chair, he seemed to sort of see his role as to provide cover for the governor, particularly for Adrian. He also played a big part back when the MPC was first set up 5 years ago in making sure that academics who were actually working on monetary policy were banned from the Monetary Policy Committee. It was just extraordinary. We're the only country in the world where an expert in monetary policy was banned, and Neil was the lead agent behind that.